Um, right. Thank you for introduction, Beto. And just I was introduced. My name is Sanshiro. I'm today presenting from Tokyo, now 11 p.m. And I hope I won't fall asleep while talking. But I'm working for Itachi, Japanese general trading firm, and also I work as a board member at Mobi. Today's presentation is about decarbonization, and as titled, Mobility Zero. This is my biography. What I will talk about today are based on my personal experience about 20 years ago. Two experiences as underlined. Firstly, 22 years ago, in August 2000, I interned at Volkswagen's headquarters in Wolfsburg in Germany, and joined Department of Environmental Strategy under Dr. Horst Minte, who was then the leader of Volkswagen Group's environment and the sustainability initiative. The second experience that I want to tell you is that during the year 2002 to 2003, I had studied at London School of Economics, or LSE, in United Kingdom, and read environmental policy with economics. My tutor or German teacher, professor, was involved in designing European emission trading scheme as known as EU ETS, which was the world's first carbon credit market created in 2005. So I was taught almost directly by policymakers about what the aim behind the decarbonization policy, especially made by Europeans. So I will tell you more in details later. I work as an expert of automobile industry in Japan and Asia, and my comments on the industry can be seen even in English newspapers as well. So I am not an engineer of blockchain, but my expertise is to overview and explain what's going on in the industry from especially policymakers' point of view and predict the future. I have written so far 3 books in Japan in the past 4 years. The second one, called Mobility Economics, is what I co-authored with Chris Ballinger, Mobi's co-founder. And the book was just published in Korea and soon in China. My recent publication is called Mobility Zero, which has been on sale since October 2021, the last year. And the Chinese version will be on sale in China, mainland China, by the end of this year. My presentation today is the essence of this book, actually. So I titled the lecture today with the book's name. Zero stands for zero carbon, and also zero start of automobile industry. This is a summary of what I want to tell you today. And this is actually what I'm telling not only to public audiences, but also to bureaucrats and politicians in Japan, especially, because this issue is a very imminent issue, not only for Japan, but also everywhere in the world, I think. Firstly, the point is that decarbonization is, in my word, European alchemy, which is to visualize new value that is invisible in the physical world. And it is about monetization of such invisibles. The decarbonization is a credit creation and monetization of one's effort for reducing the CO2 emission. Decarbonization is also can be seen as a global currency now, and policymakers compete in rulemaking for traceability of supply chain data, which includes CO2 or carbon footprint. Job creation in new ecosystem is the policymakers' main purpose of decarbonization, and the vehicle electrification or EV shift is to create such new jobs in the new ecosystem. Carbon credits, one of the carbon pricing is an incentive tool to shift one's activity to zero carbon and monetize the effort. In general, carbon pricing is seen as a carbon costing. But what is important is that, if you reduce CO2 more than required, it becomes money. So this is kind of like an initiative behind in implementing environmental policies such as carbon pricing. And the value creation in supply chain is a very important issue in auto industry, but not only in auto industry, but also in other industries as well. But today I'm going to talk about the auto industry, by the way. Decarbonization and EV shift will change competitive field from economies of scale to value creation in supply chain. And key factor for success is to create trusted digital twins and traceability of those invisibles with new values, such as carbon footprint and renewable energy. The last point is about circular economy. Circular economy, or building a circular economy of especially EV battery, supports decarbonization of vehicle life cycle assessment and promote economic security, which makes mobility sustainable. So basically, this is what I'm telling in Japan, especially these days to bureaucrats, governments, and politicians, because the country itself is facing a very difficult time to create and implement environmental policies right now. So as the title, it's Once in 500 Years Revolution, what it means. If you look back the history 500 years ago, it's pretty the same as what's happening now. The pandemic and the war stimulates movement to create a new value and accelerate internet of values. There are two kinds of revolutions. One is bookkeeping, which is about transaction cost reduction and also credit creation. 500 years ago, Black Death disease or plague, and also religious reformation happened. And after that, Renaissance brought invention of firstly double entry bookkeeping in Venice, Italy. It was a revolution of bookkeeping, right, for creating credits in transaction. The other revolution is actually about information technology. And also it was about the decentralization of data with values. Letterpress printing by Gutenberg in Germany was invented as well. And if you look at now, same revolutions has been occurring. COVID-19 and also wars in Ukraine these days, accelerates the movements around bookkeeping, especially triple entry bookkeeping, or it's called blockchain and DLT these days, especially since 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto appeared. You see the blockchain and also other kinds of crypto assets, coming to the world. This is not by accident, in my view. This is it's correlating to what's happening in the real world. Even in Japan, if you switch the TV at 7 p.m. To see the TV shows, we started seeing the words such as like Web3 or metaverse. This is a blockchain-based next generation internet world. Where many digital twins were created based on blockchain DLT. This is a new IT revolution to create new values in the cyber world. So there has been a fierce competition in rulemaking on measuring, recording, expressing the new values of these digital twins. So that's what's happening, and that's what's happening in auto industries as well. What's the new values in the era of Web3? That's, again, it's about traceability of supply chain data. There are quite many, but these four are the typical, I think, new values that are started being recognized. The first is a state of health, SOH, of people, and also EV batteries or other auto parts making for electric vehicles. You know, COVID passport is becoming, a must to have for traveling and also transporting people. So, this is about the state of health of people. You cannot see directly from your opponent, but if you see or scan the QR code of this person, you can see the data. The same kind of like SOH data management is happening in EV battery or EV passport, which is a recent word discussed amongst many automakers. It's quite important, and this is the discourse that the Mobi itself is pursuing. And then this is, well, it's not too much to say this, but battery passport is the most important the theme for auto industry or auto companies to even survive from now on. The second values in the cyber world who are increasingly valued are environmental values, which is attached to non-fossil energy values, such as renewable energies. There's an increasing needs to color what kind of energies you use or consume. Right, out of hundreds of energies you use for doing something, you have to specify how much of that has been derived from solar power or wind power or whatever, in order to calculate the third one, the carbon footprints, or scope 3 traceability or supply chain traceability of businesses. The third one is carbon footprints, especially the keyword here is a scope 3, which is what I'm going to tell you later. The life cycle assessments or the CO2 emissions throughout the life cycle of a business and products is increasingly important to make your business competitive. And for a country-wise or industry-wise, this is very important to sustain and strengthen the international competitiveness of the industry. The last one is sustainability. This is not about decarbonization directly, but ethical resourcing of key materials, especially for EV batteries, such as cobalt, and also other rare metal and rare earth materials, which are scarce, and those materials are procured in the developing worlds, and human rights due diligence is what is required even now from the US government and also European Commission to do business. These supply chain data are basically invisible in nature, but you can make digital twins of these data in the cyber world. So there has been increasing activities to visualize these invisible things with new values through your IT devices, smartphone or PC or whatever. So having these data twins together with AI and big data, you can do simulation of this ecosystem, and then you feed back the solution from this cyber world to physical world, so that you can make enlarge city smarter. I'm going to tell you about that later. I think most of the companies and institutions in Mobi are interested in smart cities. So smart cities, in my understanding, is that it's about Internet of Values shared by digital twins, which make cities smart. Building smart city is to make existing cities smart, especially those cities with suffering from the issues arising from urbanization. So the many Asian cities, especially with a lot of population facing the issues of pollution or congestion or whatever, these negative externalities can be solved by creating solutions through digital twins in the cyber world. So again, building smart city is to make existing cities smart with digital twin of the city. And decarbonization can be seen as an activity in the world of Web3 and Metaverse to create IOVs or Internet of Values amongst the digital twins. Here, the slide, what I want to tell you is that smart city is the sum or aggregate of digital twins such as people, vehicle, infrastructure, money, energy, and carbon footprints. So you have digital identity, the idea of the residents, which you can see in Estonia or even South Korea these days. We have that already. Right? And Mobi is responsible for making a vehicle identity and battery ID from now on. These are the infrastructure and also vehicles that carry the values in the cities. And the money is more and more digitalized, the digital twins, the energy and the carbon footprints, these are becoming visible through creating the digital twins. So altogether, we have smart city. Here, I want to tell you about policymakers' aim behind the decarbonization and the EV shift. Before that, initially I told you that my presentation today are based on my personal experiences. So I tell you what it is. 22 years ago, I was studying at LSE. And again, I said, like my tutor, the German professor, was one of those who were involved in designing EU ETS. And he told me like this: if we can define property rights or ownership rights on carbon dioxide, CO2, which is invisible in physical nature, the world order could change. If such property rights can be transacted through emission trading scheme ETS, it means that any effort to reduce CO2 can be exchanged like a currency. If decarbonization initiative becomes global consensus, built especially by COP, Conference of the Parties, such a currency could become a global currency that is more powerful than US dollar, euro, renminbi, etc. Decarbonization is about the creation of global currency and about the creation of a new economy based on the global currency that leads to drive industries innovation and job creation. Social and political circumstances 22 years ago was quite similar to what it is now. In this slide, you see this old gentleman left-hand side. He was the director of LSE. He was called Anthony Giddens, who is quite well-known sociology professor, and who created the political kind of sort of philosophy called the third way, which is the base of center-left governments or center-left politicians. At that time, the UK itself was led by Tony Blair, or Labour Party, who's the center-left. And not only UK, but also other European countries such as Germany, Italy, and Netherlands, led by center-left government as well. Even in the United States, Bill Clinton himself, together with Al Gore, was center-left. So, which is quite similar to what it is now. If you see the Europe, Scandinavian states are all led by center-left, and then there was changing regime in Germany as it was about 25 years ago. Now the SEP, the left, center-left party, together with Green Party, led the German government right now. And in such a chaotic period, at that time, it was just before the September 11th, but it was kind of chaotic circumstances in which these liberal parties explore and try to find a new sense of values, which is represented in very strong environmental policy, especially for emission cuts policy, and also electrification vehicle, which has started them. The Gerhard Schröder, you can see the picture on the right. I'm not sure if there's a German audiences today, but he was then the leader of Germany. He was elected from the state of Niedersachsen state, where Hanover and Wolfsburg were placed. And there was very close relationship between the government and this gentleman on the right is Dr. Ferdinand Piech, then the chairman of Volkswagen. There's a very strong public and private partnership, especially with the center-left government. This is a kind of starting point of environmental policy. And just before entering LSE, I interned at Volkswagen, as I said, and I was involved in supporting to publish this environmental report 2001-2002, which is one of the most read environmental reports, not only in Germany, but also in the world, especially by automobile industry. And since it was just after I graduated from high school, so I didn't get deeply involved in writing this, but I was taught by the Dr. Minte, who was the leader of Volkswagen's sustainability strategy, about his life cycle inventory, which is now well known as life cycle assessment. Yeah, and also I have seen a very close partnership with the leading party to make this value creation in supply chain traceability more feasible or more realistic by supporting Volkswagen and the auto industry by nurturing renewable energies from that time. The red circle on the right is it's something I want to tell you. And at that time, Volkswagen was very confident in selling cars with hydrogen engines, with e-fuel, because at that time, as far as I remember, Porsche already developed hydrogen engines already. And Ferdinand Piech, I'm sure that he ordered Porsche and even Audi to make this next generation powertrain. But as you know, that after 5 years from 2002, this wasn't realized, because there's a very big shift to renewable energy, creating life cycle assessment, low carbon and or zero carbon, which could be the barriers for not only for Volkswagen, but also auto industry or even the country. So this kind of movement happens when center-left government comes to the regime. It was, when I interned was August 2000, and 2 months before that, there was the law, which was the starting point to stay away from atomic power plants, but renewable energies, especially wind power. As I said, Mr. Schröder was from Niedersachsen state, where Hanover is one of the big generator of wind power by the North Sea, right? So now the same thing is pretty much the same thing that happened right now, because this new government, especially with the lady, Mrs. Baerbock of Green Party, she's from Niedersachsen state, especially she's from Hanover. And also she studied at LSE 1 year after I graduated. So she was actually taught by the same professors about the third way and this environmental kind of policy making this technique or whatever. So that's for me, it's kind of deja vu of what happened 22 years ago. So like this, I see what's going on in the world in terms of decarbonization as a policymakers competition, right? To create a new economy with job creation. So the main purpose of decarbonization, especially with EV shift policy, is to create jobs in the new ecosystem. And the new ecosystem is centered around EV battery that carries not only people and cargoes, but also renewable energies that create jobs, new values, shareable with other industries. You know that without semicons and batteries, you cannot manufacture cars. You cannot manufacture the cars becoming more and more electrified. So for the policymakers, the first step of creating this ecosystem is to build and increase production capacity of semicons and the battery. That's why EU and US especially have been desperate to attract Taiwan TSMC or Korean Samsung and Asian battery makers, because without them, you cannot make cars, you cannot sustain employment. In other words, even now, there are quite many production lines have stopped because of the lack of semicons. But from semicon manufacturers' standpoint, especially TSMC, doing business for automakers doesn't make money for them. They want to do more business for Apple, right? So if they see auto company who are supported by this kind of policy, environmental policy in their home country, they could see that auto company as a sustainable manufacturer, sustainable business partner, so that they supply semicons to these companies. In other words, if auto company is lagging so behind in terms of electrification of vehicles, the first kind of damage for them is the shortage of semicon. The same thing will happen in terms of battery. So there's a fierce competition about how to procure batteries right now, so that battery cost is soaring like a rocket shooting right now. There's no time to see that battery cost is declining, so that you have to create the values out of EV businesses. This is what I'm going to tell you later. So even though electrification of vehicles will likely sacrifice jobs in the existing automobile businesses, jobs created in energy generation, semicon and battery production could offset and surpass the job loss. And this is a point of why these policymakers are rushing to attract these key strategic materials and then make more EVs. And what is more, EV shift policy has been recently regarded not only for decarbonizing mobility, but also for solving energy and economic security issues. So this is why I recently called by some government and politicians in Japan to discuss about what to do. So the issues is becoming quite different these days in terms of EV policy, especially after the Ukraine war. And for industries and companies, any activities for decarbonization require costs. And the policymakers prepare with tools in the form of carbon pricing, such as carbon credits and the carbon border tax, or in Europe, it's called the CBAM, as a tokens to reward those companies that make efforts to reduce CO2 more than required. So the key point that I want to emphasize, I spend a lot of time on this slide each time, because this is very important things, is that the public-private partnership to create the new economy like this is more important than ever. And the new values to be shared for sustainable mobility derived from traceability of supply chain data, especially around the EV battery. So now with this slide, and at the last of this presentation, I'm going to show you the MOBI's EV initiative slide, because this is very important, so that I want to connect this story to that later. Okay, decarbonization as new value and the credit creation is what I'm going to tell you about. This is the introduction of some very famous Japanese professor at University of Tokyo, and he was actually he's quite famous in environmental policy, and his name is Yoichi Kaya, emeritus professor at the University of Tokyo now. His equation or identity called the Kaya identity, which was created in 1990, is the most well used or most well known equation to decompose the carbon dioxide of a country like this. I'm not going to tell you about this, but from this, what I want to do is actually, this is what I have written in my book, is that we can apply this identity to an industry or a company like this. Sorry, there's some like Japanese expression, but I put some English words here. I want you to see this equation, like firstly at these blue boxes. You can calculate or you can factorize or decompose the carbon CO2 emissions by 4 factors. One is production volume. The second is carbon intensity. The third is energy intensity. And the last one is material efficiency. So if, okay, you imagine you are the CEO of auto company, right? And you have to create cars anyway. So production volume never becomes 0, which means that whatever you do, you emit CO2. But if you look at the news or media, everybody said that the carbon neutrality or zero carbon or whatever. Now it's almost impossible in the physical world. So what is needed to make carbon neutrality is that you have to have some artificial tool or mechanism to cancel out the actual emission of CO2. One of which is carbon offsetting, which is the carbon credit transaction, right? So carbon credit is actually the artificial mechanism that offsets the actual CO2 emissions. And the other measure to cancel out this CO2 emission is direct carbon recycling or carbon removal technologies, which is called the CCUS. This is a long-term development is required to materialize these technologies. So basically, what you have to do is to think about the measures to reduce CO2 by 4-5 measures as described in this gray bands. The one is very simply, you have to use more renewable energies such as solar, wind, earth power, or carbon-free hydrogen. The second is you have to save energy, simply. The third one is you have to build circular economy, especially recycle and reuse and repurposing of EV batteries, because producing EV battery requires a lot of energy. And the associated emission of CO2 is quite big. So that, recycling, reusing, repurposing, or circular economy of EV battery is one of the hottest issue these days. And the carbon credit, if you can emit more than required, you don't need to acquire CO2 credits, or rather you can sell the credits, you can monetize it, right? And the revenues from the sales of the credits, you can use that as a sales promotion cost to create digital coins to induce your customers to purchase EVs or anything low carbon activity or consumptions, with lower prices. So this is one of the mechanism called tokenized carbon credit, TCC, which is one of the discourses that Mobi's, I think, EVGI working group is exploring. Carbon removal is, again, I'm not gonna tell you more about that. It's just a technical issue. So I show this slide to not only to companies, but also to service providers. This is the kind of equation that the many companies at makers position is interested. But this is applicable for even traders position companies as well. So this is how to reduce CO2. And the next issue is at what stage you have to reduce CO2. So this is the next issue. And today I want to emphasize this. What matter is the so-called scope 3. Which is the most important now for decarbonization in new businesses. Okay, there's a scope 1, 2, and 3 in business of, in this case, it's steel makers. My final product is like this steel product. The scope 1 is the emissions from your company's factory. It's very simple. The scope 2 emission is the CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions emitted from generating the powers that are needed to operate the factories. So in order to make scope 2 0, you need to introduce more renewable energies, or these days it's called RE100. 100 renewable energies. This is what is required by Apple to electric parts manufacturers to make their parts. Otherwise, Apple doesn't procure parts from that company. So this is even in US, I mean, RE100 scope 2 is, I think it's not something new. So Apple also, and also Amazon, or these IT or digital platformers, even, they require suppliers of parts and goods or services scope 2 as RE100. And then again, scope 3 is now the most important thing. Scope 3 is upstream supply chains and also downstream supply chain. The upstream supply chain covers the scope 3 emissions, which is from extraction of fuel and materials, right? You have to make these low carbon or zero carbon from now on. That's one thing. The scope 3 in downstream is the CO2 emitted from the transporting or delivering of the products you make, and also the usage of the products and also disposal of product. You have to cover all these scope 1, 2, 3 CO2 emissions, and then this is called life cycle assessment, LCA. And as I said, December to 2020, there was a quite shocking directive was published by European Commission, which is on the battery life cycle assessment. And, it was the kind of renewal of the existing regulation about recycling the battery materials and the reuse of used batteries. But the end of 2020, when this directive was announced, what was shocking is that from July 2024, European Commission, or EU, requires those manufacturers who use batteries, to report CO2 emissions emitted from the production of batteries. So you have to at least track and trace carbon footprint traceability in manufacturing batteries. Why this is shocking is that this reporting is going to be the base for regulating the carbon pricing in the future, which means that for instance, Japanese auto companies, you make EV and export it to Europe, you are required to equip that EV, electric vehicle, with battery with low or zero carbon emission in manufacturing, which is quite difficult, especially for Japan, because Japan itself is less dependent on renewable energy. So this is a kind of new rule making by Europeans to set the carbon or green tariff on any imports that have disadvantage in renewable energy generation. So this is shocking, especially for Japanese manufacturers, but also for US manufacturers as well. So the discussion about especially this cross-border green tariff in the form of carbon border tax, it all starts from this. And this is this was then the directive, but later it became regulation. So which is more stringent right now. And as far as I understand, the current discussion around regulating this towards the end of this year is that the timeline is much nearer. As I said, on this directive, it says this regulation is going to be enacted from July 2024, but current discussion is based on July 2023, which means that from next year, you have to comply with this regulation. And also in this directive, the coverage of batteries is on industrial batteries and EV batteries, especially for 4 wheels. But what's being discussed now is the vehicles include the 2 wheels and the e-bikes. So the regulation is going to scope more diverse, businesses. So this is very important to look at. But in other words, if you do a business, not only for Europe, but also from now on the US as well, track and trace of carbon footprint in manufacturing EVs, including parts, is very important to make your business competitive, or even you can increase your competitiveness in international trading. And it was about batteries, but not only about EV batteries, but also other materials, especially, there is a very fierce battle in rulemaking on this life cycle assessment disclosure. And especially financial markets have been pressuring corporates to slash Scope 3 emissions these days. While COP26 was held, it was last November, IFRS Foundation, which is a rule maker of financial reporting, has announced to set standards board to make this rule about scope 3 emissions reporting for listed companies, global listed companies, especially those introducing IFRS accounting method. And this board, called International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, is now set in Frankfurt. So the IFRS itself is a global rulemaking consortium, but the ISSB, it looks very European, especially German-centric, in my view. So there's a fierce competition from now on, you know, in order to make rulemaking. And even just, as far as I remember, it was just a month ago or last month, US government is actually, especially SEC, is proposing the kind of rules to enhance and standardize climate-related disclosures for investors as it is. It's about scope 3 rulemaking. So this is very fierce rulemaking competition in carbon footprint traceability. So, you have to watch out, what would be a kind of a de facto standard or de jure standard of this carbon footprint traceability in order to make your business sustainable. Right, and so back to scope 3. The easiest way to cut scope 3 carbon footprint is simply make transportation or delivery zero carbon with utilizing electric vehicles. So that you see such kind of phenomena, especially in US, like Rivian or other electric vehicle manufacturers, as a startup even, are trying to make commercial vehicles in the form of EVs, and also like F-150, is just started being electrified. There's a greater need for transporters, because they have to search scope 3, right? It's not just carrying people or cargoes, but it carries environmental values, right? So it's, for instance, like Uber itself also, they want to procure more Tesla Model 3. Yeah, and then, they want Uber drivers to carry people with zero carbon, with electric vehicles, in order to cut scope 3. So that the Hertz started procuring, as far as I remember, is 100,000 units of Model 3, and half of which is going to be rented to Uber drivers, right? So very strong EV demand these days is backed by this scope 3 emission cuts. It's one of the phenomena we have to watch out. And then the other thing we have to watch out is Model 3. It's the Model 3 was on sale since 2017. So that if you go to the auction market these days, you can see that used Model 3, which has been operated for 3 years and sold at the auction market, then like once you buy the used Model 3 and then charge it and see the driving range in one charging, depreciation of such range has been very small. So that residual value of Tesla Model 3 in 3 years, age of 3 years, is very high. It's more than 70%. At this range, in general, it's about 60% to 65% is the kind of average, but 70 to 75% residual value of Model 3 is impressive. So for those fleet, for those commercial vehicle operators, including Uber or rent car or leasing companies, they see cars. They buy cars with high residual values because basically they operate their cars on average, as far as I know, it's 3 years, and then sell the used cars to auction market. They want to sell the cars at a higher price so that they can slash the total cost of ownership of those cars. So with higher residual values, they want to buy more EVs. So this is what's happening now. And from this, the kind of idea coming from this is that we want to know about the quality of used batteries on the used EV. If we have such a system to evaluate and visualize the quality of used batteries, that value can be reflected to used car prices. Right? But so far, there isn't such kind of mechanism, because we don't know much about how usable the battery is. So that, for instance, Nissan's Leafs used cars at the age of 3 years, it's very low because, that used car prices doesn't reflect the quality of battery, even though the battery itself is still not almost new, but it's very good quality. Yeah. In order to create this mechanism of valuation or residual value prediction system, what is needed is any data on measuring the state of health of batteries. So this is the kind of motivation behind battery SOH is very important because they want to make used EVs profitable so that those owners of EV can sell used EVs at a higher price, and with that revenues, that person can buy new EVs, at higher prices. As I said, battery cost is now increasing because it's controlled by the increase in variable costs or material costs, which is what car makers cannot do anything. In the past, battery makers, especially in CAT or LG Chem or these companies, have invested a lot to make a mass production of batteries so that they could dilute the fixed cost of battery costs. But now it's not zero, but it's very thin already. The cost of battery is now controlled by variable costs. What you have to do to make a business out of making and using EVs is to create new values through creating this new value system on used batteries, and hence you increase used car prices of electric vehicle. That's why everybody, not only manufacturers, but especially for used car traders, are looking at this phenomenon, the high residual values of EV. Okay, recent topics and developments is what I want to tell you. Sorry, I have to talk quickly. And then again, scope 3. The other strategy to reduce the scope 3 emission is to build circular economy, especially on batteries, so that reusing and repurposing of used parts and or recycling of materials in used parts. If we could create this market or resale markets with established battery SOH valuation mechanism, you can decrease the disposal of products, and also you can decrease the dependence on upstream fuel and materials extraction. So there's a very big smile curve with the potential monetization through decarbonization by building circular economy. So this is another motivation behind the track and trace of parts, especially for electric EV battery, is very important. It's for decarbonization itself. The other motivation these days, which is discussed, is about economic security. Right? This is well, sorry, it's Japanese, but I was interviewed at some Japanese financial TV show, and because this is one of the key issues now around batteries. Much of the materials have actually come from Russia, especially nickel, right? This rare metal coming from Russia. We don't know what's going on from now on, but we are sure that nickel cost is going to shoot up, or it's going to be very difficult to procure this material, so that it's very difficult to make EV batteries. Some companies are going to face that difficulty, but one solution for that is to create a circular economy of batteries, so that you can reuse the materials, or you can actually repurpose the used batteries to other industries. And if you can circulate this, you can decrease the dependence on such a geopolitical risks, right? So that this is one of the big motivations behind the circular economy. So EV battery is something called the urban mines, because it contains a lot of rare metals and rare earths that you cannot procure in US or Europe or Japan a lot, but it has a lot of values, right? If you can make such kind of ecosystem, not only by manufacturer of cars and batteries, but also traders, dealerships, these could be the points to collect these used batteries, and you can kind of like make a fence to protect and then gather even these urban mines, so that this could be a profit not only for industry but also for countries. So this is very important theme these days. And another issue about EVs, this is about Honda's mobile power pack. Honda is a Mobi's member, and I quite like this human-centric user experience design around mobile swappable batteries, which has a huge potential in my opinion. It's centered around your house. Your house generates powers, and these are charged your mobile power packs. You can use it while you're living in the house. At night, during the day, you can use one of those packs for 2 wheels, or if you do businesses in farming, you can use it. Even like if it snows in the winter, you can use it for snow removal. If you're going to the sea, you can use it outboard motor, whatever. And also you can have this kind of ecosystem, not only your household, but also in the community with battery station like those. And this is not about 4 wheels, but this is about 2 wheels and 3 wheels. As you can see, that there's a very interesting pilot project carried out in India by Honda. It's 3 wheels, auto rickshaw. And it could be possible in Thailand, auto tuk-tuk. In Asia, there's a lot of opportunities for these mobile power packs. Mobile power packs carries not only about renewable energies, but it carries data, anything on mobility services that, this data could be shared in order to make ecosystem sustainable. The left-hand side, you see Komatsu's very small shovel cars. This mobile pack can be used for industrial vehicles as well. And this is construction machines and also other industrial vehicles, including forklifts. This is usable. I think this course is very not becoming common right now, but it's gaining a momentum in Asia. But I'm sure that this kind of ecosystem is very applicable, especially in cities, urban cities, in Europe and the US as well. So this is one of the discourse that I especially want Mobi to explore, because this is about social inclusion of people, which is sustainable, not only for vehicles, but also for people. This is Itochu's pilot project in Japan. Itochu has provided energy storage system, ESS, and solar power generators, and also this AI program to manage this power source for supermarket chain in Japan. And we use this swappable we use these renewable energies for this shopping, these stores that carries the products that the customers buy on the mobile phones, and running these EVs is less costly than carrying these goods with ICE, internal combustion engines. So this was a very interesting pilot project that made it clear that EV operation is much cheaper than running ICE, especially now the gas price has been soaring up in Japan even. So this is a good example that this ecosystem is economical. And if you can realize that this eco-friendly or less carbon consumption as a kind of rewards using shoppers points, together with again tokenized carbon credit, this is a very good scheme to make your customers or alter the customers' behavior to less carbon activities, right? And rewarding those consumption. And this kind of activity or this kind of business model is going to become common in the future, we believe. So lastly, Mobi's battery initiative. This is a dashboard which was put on the web last week or 2 weeks ago. This is very good expression about what Mobi is doing and what this initiative will bring out. So I highly recommend you to read through this dashboard by scanning this QR code if you're interested in. I think if you're not a Mobi member, I think it's a good timing to join. Okay, thank you. That's it. And I think the time is over. So maybe I could take 1 or 2 questions. Otherwise, you can send me emails through LinkedIn that you can find myself by scanning this QR code. Okay. Sorry, I have talked a lot, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Sanshiro. This was a very interesting presentation. Again, thank you for the valuable insights. Well, it looks like we're at the top of the hour.
Okay, yeah. In that case, yeah,
we can.
Yeah. If there's a question, just shoot me an email. I think that's better. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that definitely. Please reach out to Sanshiro-san, or you can send us your questions regarding the lecture. And please look out for the recording on our website. Again, thanks everyone for joining the lecture today. And again, Sanshiro, thank you so much for this great presentation.